welcome everyone to this really special session this morning, our first session of day 2 with Miss Rhiannon Thomas, who is doing the From Transactional to Transformational Legal Practice. And I'm particularly excited about this session because Rhiannon Thomas is one of the leaders in the integrative law movement. She has really been pioneering this for over a decade, and it is incredible to have Rhiannon in the house today. Rhiannon has a practice that spans multi-jurisdictions across the UK, EU, and Cape Town in South Africa. She has over 2 decades of legal experience across these countries and these 2 continents. And she's an RICS accredited commercial mediator, a values consultant and coach, as well as a certified conscious contracts provider. And so Miss Thomas has been singular in pioneering the integrative law movement, as I indicated, and we are in for a real treat with Rhiannon this morning as she shares how young lawyers and lawyers at any level can start rethinking and reimagining how they do their legal practice and how to bring their whole selves into the legal practice. So it is core to what we're trying to do in the future law. And so we're really grateful to have you here with us this morning, Rhiannon. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Thank you for that kind introduction, Margaret. I just wanted to say that I've chosen to speak about conscious planning for end of life this morning because that's something very close to my heart. But the thinking behind that and the processes involved can be used in all areas of law, and some of the tools can be brought into different areas. So I think for any lawyer who's ever felt that they wanted to find a different way to practice, some of the things I'm going to say are going to resonate with them.
Yeah. So shall we start with your presentation, and then we have a lovely conversation after?
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Are you seeing my slides now? Just to check.
Yes, we are.
Okay, brilliant. So welcome to today's second day of the Future Law Virtual Summit, Negotiating the New Normal. I'm Rhiannon Thomas, and the topic that I've chosen to speak about with regard to from transactional to transformational practice is particularly around end of life and an integrative law approach. So the traditional approach to wills is very formulaic, and it becomes very dry and mechanical for lawyers. It becomes an exercise of tick boxes where forms are filled in, and it actually actively avoids the reason for the conversation, which is death. And that is a bit like an elephant in the room with the parties and the lawyer. And so a conscious integrated approach allows the clients to engage more fully with their legacy, and also actually for the lawyer to engage more fully with that as well. So this is a story really, starting with, for all those lawyers who've ever felt alone or a bit different, that they didn't quite fit in, and that they are maybe feeling lost or not sure which direction to take in their practice, but something just doesn't feel like it's working anymore. And so I would like to open a door and show a different way or a different path that is possible. This is a picture of a young woman, a young girl reading books. And as a child, I love stories. I was the youngest in my family, and so I spent quite a lot of time alone, and reading was one of the things I did to pass the time. And I love stories about the human condition. So stories about love and life and death and everything in between were the ones that I was most interested in, and the different narratives that can play out in people's lives. I grew up in apartheid South Africa, born into apartheid South Africa. It was just something that was how life was, and so it was a really strange experience looking back, because there was no questioning. It was just presented at this, that white people were better than any other race, and we had privilege beyond any other country for white South Africans. And the only contact we had with people of color was those who came to work in the home. But I was very fortunate in that my parents were older, and so they traveled a lot. And I got the opportunity as a young child, about 9 years old, to travel around to many countries. And I saw people of different races living together and doing the same things and using the same amenities. And it really struck me, because I realized that apartheid was just another narrative, a story we were being told. There was no truth in it at all, and that actually many other narratives were possible. So when I was about 15, I experienced my first loss, true loss, in that my grandfather, who I loved very much, died. And I also started suffering from depression, which has been a lifelong journey for me. And so I learned to put a happy face on and tell a happy story, but inside there was a lot of turmoil and sadness and loss. And that has stayed with me, this duality of pretending to be fine when things are really tough. Then in 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from prison after many, many years. And it was a momentous day in South Africa. I was still in school, and the school that I was at actually didn't even stop to listen to the speech. We just carried on as though it was something that wasn't important. But I knew it was very important. And when I heard what he had to say, and I had followed things he had done, I realized that I wanted to be part of a new narrative for South Africa. So I went off to university, and I was going to become a journalist. So I studied English, and I was going to tell stories, different narratives around what was possible and in South Africa. Anyway, I loved studying English. I loved the reading and engaging with the novel, and it was a really happy place for me, university. And that's the University of Cape Town. And then in my second year, I was involved at the age of 21, was involved in a severe car accident, and my mother died that same year, very suddenly and unexpectedly. And things changed forever. I suddenly realized that things were impermanent, life could end at any moment, and I was again very, very struggled with the grief of losing someone so important in my life at that age. So it took a long time before I felt better and able to re-engage with the world. But I went back to university and I decided I would study law, like Nelson Mandela, and use law as a way to create a new narrative. And I loved law. I loved studying it. I loved the intellectual rigors. I loved meeting all these different people at university, people of all races. University was then open to everyone, and really just getting to grips with making a difference in the world. And so I finished studying law, and then I went off to go and be a lawyer. And on my very first day, I arrived in my suit, and it was a lot of busy people looking very stressed, all making, things really, that they had these very important things to do, which didn't seem to really be making much of a change in the world or making things better. In fact, a lot of the time they seem to be making things worse by creating more conflict. And after a year of that, I quit. I found it very soulless, and so I went back to my happy place, which was the University of Cape Town, and decided maybe I could make a difference in the world in academia. And I began to look into health and human rights, and how could one use human rights to improve the health, especially of older people in South Africa. But that also didn't really fulfill me completely, because I felt a bit like I was in an ivory tower and disconnected from the world. But one of the things that I took away with me from that time, which has become so integral to my practice, is this concept of the integrated health professional. And the integrated health professional has a knowledge dimension, the knowing dimension, which is what you learn at university. And then there's the reflective and empathic, which are the intrapersonal and interpersonal dimensions. And at law school, we weren't taught anything about that. Maybe a little bit of interpersonal, but no intrapersonal. And I decided I would become the integrated legal professional, although no one had ever heard of such a thing. Anyway, I started my firm, and this is the landing page of my firm. And I wanted my vision was to practice law consciously in a way that is open, honest, authentic, and respectful, always maintaining a friendly yet professional attitude. But I practice it very much within the system and within the paradigm of law. But what I noticed, especially when it came to drafting wills for people and talking about death, was that this was an incredibly emotive conversation. And actually, most of the time, the skills that I needed were EQ skills, not my intellect and not my knowledge, but really just about helping people to look at what their legacy might be when they died. And people often said, well, if I died, this, and I kind of realized it's when you die, because this is something that you can't avoid. So then in 2012, I had the great opportunity of meeting an American lawyer, Kim Wright, who's presenting at this summit. And I suggest, if you want to know more about integrative law, go to her talks. And she'd written this book, Lawyers as Peacemakers. And it was like a Bible for me, because I found my meaning, reasons, other people, and a tribe that I could be part of. And so I reinvented myself with a different kind of practice called Milkwood Law. And I put this landing page of that bit out of date website at the moment up here, because I just want to show you the difference between that and the Rhiannon Thomas and Associates. This law firm was going to have love as its core value, and it's in the logo. There's a little heart hidden in the tree. And it was going to be a collaborative consultancy working with other professionals. So here are some nuts and bolts about Milkwood Law and the conscious will process that I'd like to share with you. Let's see if I can move on that one. There we go. So the first thing to build a collaborative legal process is to find people to collaborate with. And these amazing women are the people that I collaborated with. They are, between them, there's a clinical psychologist, a grief counselor, an adult educator, and a death doula. And these were the women who held the space to talk about the emotive part of the conversation. The other thing is to actually bring the elephant into the room, and the idea that we are going to die, and that our wills are the last contract we have with this world in a way, and that it's not just a simple document. This is your last opportunity to do something positive for your legacy, for your family. Sorry, that's the coffee machine in the background. I apologize. The other thing was to bring in values, have discussions about who the client actually is. What is important to them? Is fairness really important, or is equity more important, or equality? Or equity, I suppose. Do they want to leave a legacy of a deep legacy, or is it not too important for them? So the thing was to, instead of talking about things, was to start with values. So move from values to things rather than just look straight at the things, and to expand the option, to expand the definition of what are these things that we're talking about. So they're physical things. Mostly people think about property and body, but there's also your mind and your heart, and that's your legacy. What do you leave behind? And then non-physical things. What are the stories about the items you're leaving to people? And this process of bringing values in, working collaboratively, shifting the focus really has a lot of benefits for clients. And actually it has a huge amount of benefits for lawyers as well. So the benefits for clients are they feel heard, they feel safe, they can have a meaningful conversation, and they leave the process with a real sense of peace and security about how their family will be looked after. So these were the things that I thought about when I decided to change my practice. What could I do differently? How could I become more transformational? And these were the things: a different process, maybe a collaborative offering, shifting the focus. In my shift, I moved the focus towards values. Could I ask different questions and allow time for reflection? So my process is not a 1 hour, you come and we've done a will. It's a slower process. It slows it down so that people can really engage. So you might be wondering what you could do. And here are some actual practical tools that I'm going to share with you. And you're welcome to use them and find ways to build them into your own practice. So these are some of the different questions. So some of the questions that I ask my clients in a document that's called Getting to Know You are: what is most important? What is important for us to know about you? What is most important to you? What is worrying you most? How can we best support you? And what are your top 5 values? And these are not questions about their staff or how much money they have or the tangible things. These are questions about intangible things. Another thing is to actually offer clients the opportunity to create a legacy. And I don't do the legacy work myself. This is done by the collaborative professionals that I spoke about earlier. They are the ones who help with this process. And this is just an example of a letter that somebody could write to somebody they care for, that could be read after they have died. So in closing, I've got 2 things that I'd like to share with you. This lovely quote that I came across a couple of days ago, actually, and it really struck me as about being different, being yourself, and also daring to stand out from the crowd, like that piece of corn that's sticking up above all the rest. This is taken in the village, near the village where I live in England. So do not compare, do not measure. No other way is like yours. All other ways deceive and tempt you. You must fulfill the way that is in you. And that's what I feel like I'm doing. And it gives me a great sense of purpose and meaning. And then another quote that I love is an African saying that is: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And so I really urge you to reach out to people on the summit and to connect and network, because when you find your tribe, it gives you the courage and the permission to start doing things differently. And then together we can go far. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Rhiannon, I am really, profoundly moved by your story, your journey from the inside out to the work that you're doing. I genuinely didn't know about your research and finding out about the integrated health professional, and you designing and coming up with this innovation of bringing it into the legal profession. In fact, what I had thought I'd known about your story was that you had read about it through Kim's amazing book, which also influenced me tremendously. But you actually independently came to this. Is that so? Could you tell us a little bit more about that? How you came to this concept of integrated health professional, and yeah, what made you recognize that we needed to do it, and tell us a little more about that, please. Yeah.
So that was in 2000 and about 2003, 2004. I got the opportunity to facilitate that course, which was called Becoming an Integrated Health Professional. And my interest was, I was sort of asked if I'd like to facilitate the course and bring some expertise around health and human rights, which was interesting for the health science students. So before that, I hadn't even thought about this idea of an integrated professional. For me, a professional was someone like a lawyer who was very aloof, very intelligent, with an expert in their field, and who came in and solved problems. And that was kind of the idea of what I had as a professional, and an upright person. And then in facilitating this course, I saw how you could teach people skills about empathy, that empathy was something that people could actually develop and learn. And it opened my mind to a sort of away from a fixed growth mindset towards a growth, a fixed mindset, to a growth mindset, that people could learn interpersonal skills and they could develop their professionalism. And so I facilitated, I think it was for 3 years in that course, working with the health science students, and saw them, these were all first year students, so very young, 18, and sort of saying, why do we need to learn about feelings, was one of the great questions. Why do we need to learn about feelings? And then I said to one of the students, well, one day you're going to have to tell someone that they're going to die. And how are you going to do that? And when I was saying that, I realized as a lawyer, we're talking about, death. We tell people that they're going to lose everything, or that this case is not going to go in their favor, it's going to end up costing them. And I realized that's what was missing in the legal curriculum, was a course about how to become an integrated legal professional. And I did try to convince our law school that this was really important, but the response was, the curriculum is too full already, and we don't have time for that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I can't make a difference there, but if I develop my skills, my interpersonal and my intrapersonal skills, I can be a sort of weirdo shining light for the integrated legal professional. And so, so I had that concept already. And then when I met Kim, it just cemented it for me that it wasn't a weird out there kind of thing, that actually there were many, many lawyers who felt that this was necessary for our well-being. And yeah, so that was sort of the journey from there to Kim. And I just want to add one little thing, Margaret, is that in that picture of the wonderful woman who I collaborate with, there's another woman who I'm collaborating with on marriage contracts and cohabitation agreements. And that woman is Dr. Lorna Alkers, who is the one who created the Becoming an Integrated Health Professional course.
Wow.
So that is extremely exciting, because she brings all that to the table, and perhaps we can do other things together in the future.
So, I mean, what is interesting about this, there are different movements or strains or concepts of this more conscious approach to legal practice. So there's the collaborative model and other models. Prior to you coming up with this, let's do this, let me see if I can become an integrated professional, law professional, was the term integrative law being used in this way?
No, I hadn't heard a term of integrative law. There was, I found holistic law that was
Yes.
about as, but there were at that stage, um, there wasn't the integrative law that I could find, and I think for me is that I wanted to leave law. I mean, I didn't say that in my story, but there came a point where I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. If I had to be like that, or if I had to work in that system and in that paradigm, and that as soon as I made that decision not to be like that and just try and do it my own way, I felt a lot happier within the profession. And then when I found the integrative law movement, I realized there was a place for me. And one of my goals is to help lawyers who feel like they're lost and alone to find that feeling of there is actually a place for a person like me in the legal profession.
Mm. And Rhiannon, you've gone through quite a bit of death and grief. How do you think that changed you? How do you think that that changed you? And do you think you would have come to this path without that experience?
I don't think so. I think the main thing that had changed is that I'm a much nicer person than I used to be.
Wow.
So so there's and why I say that is because death has taught me that there's a limited amount of time, and so to be as honest and authentic as you can in your relationships, because things can change at any moment, and also to be a bit less judgmental because we're all going through something. So, you know, the day that my mother died, I walked out of the hospital and it was a beautiful sunny day and everyone was just going about their life. And if they had looked at me, they probably would have thought, maybe they thought I'd just gone to see someone for a, you know, brief appointment or something. That you can never know what's going on inside another person. And it could have been the day, you could be walking past them on the day their mother died and not know it. And so I think that that's something that has changed me. And also the feeling that it gave me, it kind of, I suppose the knowing that death is something that is always there with you makes me live my life more fully, makes me take opportunities that come along and not, I used to be very shy as a child and I didn't want to go and, you know, play the games with all the children and I stood back. Now I don't stand back. Now I step forward because today is the day to do that. So I think that's what's changed.
And, you know, I have to say it's a deep privilege to have met you a couple years ago, I mean days, years ago. And, you know, you have that consistency, that warmth, authenticity, and openness. You certainly embody that. And it's been a real privilege knowing you, Rhiannon. What would you say I looked at the questions that you posted up there. What would you say your top 5 values are?
So that's sneaky, throwing back one of my questions at me.
I thought it was a really good question, you know,
Yeah,
that we should be conscious and
yeah,
become really conscious about what our values are.
yeah,
And if we don't know, we need to do the work
yeah,
to uncover and unpack that. Yeah.
yeah. I think a lot about values, and values change, but my core top 5 values are the first one for me is integrity, and what that means is it's about walking the talk. So and being whole, the wholeness of integrity. Embracing all the parts. Another one of my core values is love. And for me, it encompasses all the aspects of love. So compassion, empathy, uh, passion, family love. A bit like the Greeks have different definitions, different types of love, words for different types of love, which we don't
Yeah.
really have in English. So it's all those aspects, and love is probably my core, actual number one value. And then I also have a value of being playful or humorous. For me, that's really important, especially when you work with things as serious as death.
Yeah.
It really helps to be able to bring some lightness into your life. And so I love humor and wit and playing. And that's 3. And then another one is generosity. So for me, generosity is about sharing my skills openly with other people. There's enough, it's this concept that there's enough for me and there's enough for you, and there's actually enough for all of us, which I find is very opposite to many lawyers who are very,
For sure.
They want to keep all their clients, they don't want to share stuff, they're not collaborative because they're worried you might take something from them. So generosity. And a fifth one is or openness, I suppose, is they're kind of close because it's about just being me. And in the, not that person who I felt had to wear that black suit and play a role and her little heels. I'd never worn high heels until I went to work in a law firm, because that's just not me. And I still don't wear high heels, but I felt like I had to wear them. So that was not authentic at all. So often these days when I see my clients, I'm wearing my trainers because that's who I am and that's how I feel comfortable. And they don't seem to mind.
Wow. There was something, I mean, I'm looking at the time, I think we are going to be closing up the conversation shortly, but someone is joining us. So I do want to, you said your top core value was love. And we had a session yesterday in the Structural Peace Lab where we were talking about what love is. And would you, and it really has legal implications because the facilitator yesterday was talking about love is justice when we stand in an unjust and systemically oppressive system. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of seeing love, because love encompasses many things. But one of the things for me is that when it doesn't, so we have our intellect and we have our heart intelligence, and our heart intelligence tells us when something isn't right, and it's a non-cognitive knowing. And injustice, when you look at it and when you experience it, it just doesn't feel right. And I suppose for me, yeah, if you could stand in that system and radiate love, you would be radiating justice. So I like that very much. Because love cares about everybody. And yeah.
I love how you put that, and I want to thank you, Rhiannon, for sharing so much about this. So is there any where people can go to learn more about how they can, create contracts and wills, marriage contracts and wills in the way that you do it?
Well, so that Milkwood Law website has got some information on it. And
what's the URL there?
milkwoodlaw.co.za or .co.uk.
Okay.
And also we have developed some training courses, but for me it's which we've offered only in Italy, but was such a wonderful experience with Italian lawyers. Because part of it is examining your own relationship with these things. And so that needs to happen in a workshop kind of experience where someone guides you, or if you can do your own self-reflection work, like looking, so this is the area that I work in. What are my experiences in that area, not as a lawyer, just as a person, and then sort of to bring that more human focus into the process. So it's really, some of it's about your own journey. I've spent many years in therapy, that's helped a lot. And then, yeah, I mean, I would love to run more trainings on how to do this.
Yeah. And some of that will, I'm sure, will be coming up, because I know you're working on those things. So it's very much like the Carl Jung quote that you left us with. You know, each of us must do the work within ourselves to understand who we are, and how then does that transform the way we practice law or any other profession that we're in. And any final words for lawyers who will be looking at this and who are joining us?
So my final words would be just to be courageous, and to think of the heart, the word courage, you know, cœur is the French word for heart. Listen to your heart. If your heart says this isn't working for you, or it's not working for your client, then listen to that and connect with what would work. And don't be afraid to take a different path, because we all have a unique path. And that is, you know, that is our journey. So the more you can be on your own path, the better for the world, because then we're all here doing what we're meant to be doing.
Thank you, Rhiannon. It's
Thanks,
been a deep pleasure having this conversation with you.